Confidence is not a fluke, confidence is a choice, and it begins with our mindset. In this podcast, you will find a variety of research proven strategies that will lead you from being self critical, your worst enemy, to being the most confident version of yourself. I am Olga, former therapist, confidence life coach, blissfully an IVF mother, a wife, and this is the Journey to Happy podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Journey to Happy podcast. I'm Olga, and I'm very excited to be having a very interesting conversation today with a very special guest who is coming all the way. Well, she's not coming, she's still there. She's from New York, and she is a therapist for individuals, couples, and families. And today we're going to be talking about relationships. Why do we get ghosted? Where do these people go? And maybe even look into what we can look into ourselves when we're the people who are left or when we leave for whatever reason, the relationship. What can we learn from ourselves? So I want to introduce you to Elena. Did I say that right? We practice because I want to say it in Spanish. So Elena Bruun. She's the author of 3 books and maybe 4. No, four. Four books. And I am so honored that you took the time, Elena, to come and talk to us. I'm so happy.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's a great pleasure. So what brought my interest to really want to have you in the podcast is one of your books, Estranged, because it's something that in my previous life as a therapist came up a lot, which is a family member that maybe just wanders off the family. We don't know where they went. Why are they cutting us off? But also in relationships, maybe as you're early dating, somebody just ghosts you. I was telling you that seems to be like a very common response nowadays where nobody's having adult conversations and telling you, listen, I'm not into you and this is why. Or, I've got somebody else. I don't know the actual reason. So it leaves people to wonder and answer the question as to why they left. And I thought you and I could have some conversations about this. I know that in your book, you specifically talk about the types of cutoff. You call them the cutoff types.
Yeah.
And how they could be one-sided, but maybe not necessarily one-sided 100%. How, we'll just talk about them, break them down into what they are, what are these types of cutting people off your life. And I think you bring also a great point before we were recording that the cutoffs can also be, sometimes it's us who's making that decision of cutting it off, and how important it is to have a level of insight, inner insight, as to why we're leaving this off. What's our part of the problem? It takes 2 to tango. How are we tangoing with this problem? And then hopefully prevent that from being an issue in future relationships following us. Does that sound fun to you to dive into?
Sounds like about 5 hours worth, but we'll squeeze it in.
Yes, friends, read her book, okay? People, read her book.
It's on Amazon.com.
There you go. It's on Amazon. And I would imagine towards the end, you can tell people where to find you. If you guys find a connection
Sure.
with Elena and you would like to engage in therapy, whether for yourself or for the couple or for the family, she will let us know where we can find her.
Okay.
Right? Because now you do online, so you can help people all over.
Okay.
Let's dive in. Tell me about these types of cutoffs. Why do people leave without telling us the reason? And what do we do about it?
Okay. Ghosting is only one way that people cut off, but let me define it for you. Because at the other end of the spectrum, there's someone who says, look, I want to meet with you. We're going to have dinner and discuss why I'm not going to continue this relationship. And I feel that part of it is my problem and part of it is yours, but it's just not working. And these are the reasons why. That is a very generous and wonderful way to cut off if you have to do it. But ghosting is at the other end where all of a sudden the person is gone and you don't know where they went. You can't find them and you never see them again. And that's the end of it. And you're left with this terrible mystery, especially if it was a very close relationship or one that you would expect to be very close. And I can tell you just a tiny story about my first experience of ghosting. Not of me, but nevertheless, I was maybe 8 years old, living in an apartment building in New York City and on the Upper West Side, for those of you who know New York. And my mother sent me down to the superintendent who lived on the first floor because there was a leak in the sink or some such thing like that. So I went down and I knocked on the door, and his wife answered after a while. They had a bunch of kids, and she said in Spanish, I can't say it, but he's not here anymore. He left, and I don't know where he is.
Oh no.
So there's nobody here today. Goodbye. And she closed the door, and you could tell she was very, very, very upset. And apparently he never came back. She asked him to go around the corner and buy, in those days, it was called a carton of milk. And he went out for the milk and he never came back. So I delivered this news to my mother, who was very upset, and I always remembered it. That's an amazing thing to me that it's stuck in my mind. Ghosting.
Absolutely. It's traumatizing. What happened when you went to get this milk?
Who knows? I mean, it's possible. I mean, you could speculate. Was overwhelmed by the number of kids he had, by life, whatever. And I'm sure there's a story, but that's beyond what you were asking me. So that's ghosting, but there's so many other kinds of cutoffs. And I can go through some of them if you want. I mean,
Yeah, we could, but let's stick to ghosting first because I think it's so relevant to today. I wasn't thinking of a husband leaving a mom with all his children. But that happens.
yes,
That still does happen. I have clients who are in the dating scene and they're going on a few dates and they have plans to see each other again, and then this person disappears. And I have a client whose daughter, for example, without previous knowledge, like previous telling her, just decided, no, I'm not talking to you anymore. No matter what attempts she makes, she still doesn't know. And I do think I call asking why is such a vortex. I call it a black vortex. That's where we're just going to like, because the answer, we never come up with a concrete answer because that person never concretely told us, but it does open the doors to explore deeply what could have happened, which can drive a person crazy when you don't have concrete answers. Going back to the example you gave us, that wife, I don't know if she's come up with an answer that satisfies her heart as to justify the reason this man left her and their children. So, you know, what goes behind? What do you think as a psychoanalytical therapist? What do you think goes behind the person who leaves and says, I'd rather not explain. I'll just see you later. This is what's safe for me to do. And the only thing I'll do.
that's already something that he or she said. I don't want to explain. I just don't want to go on. At least they gave you that. Sometimes it's, I'll call you next week, and then they don't. I've been through that. I have lived that as well. So I'm very familiar. I would say mostly it's fear, anxiety about the person you're leaving getting really angry at you and you don't know what to do with it. Maybe they're trying to be kind and spare your feelings, right? I had a client years ago who was very sensitive to smell. I can't believe I'm dredging these stories up, but he's no longer with us, so I can tell it.
It's saved.
He had a girlfriend. He kept telling me she just doesn't smell right, but I can't tell her. So at some point, he stopped calling her and stopped, and he wouldn't tell her why.
We thought it would be terrible to say why.
Yeah, he was a nice man. He was trying not to hurt her feelings, but it would have been helpful for her to know. Maybe it was just his nose that didn't like her. Somebody else's might have, we don't.
That's right. I think this is such a good point for people to think about. Sometimes the person leaving and avoiding the conversation really truly thinks they're doing you a favor. They don't want to break your heart, but they think will be heartbreaking. And so they'd rather not say anything at all, which could be even more hurtful because silence says something. But for the person who's being left, I think it's important to think that it could be an act of love from their heart, that they're thinking they're doing something lovely.
You know what? Do you know the story? It's an international lifetime bestseller, Bambi, the
Yeah.
children's story.
Mhm.
Remember the saying that Bambi's mother or his girlfriend Feline's mother said, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at
At
all.
all. Mhm.
Right out of Bambi. I think that's true, but you can say something really nice and say the reason that you're leaving in the kindest possible way.
Hmm.
It's never good to deliver a criticism without, as some people would say, sugarcoating it. I say in the kindest possible way. I think you're a wonderful person. There's nothing really wrong with you. It's just that one client said, I like the other woman's problems more than I like yours.
And I think that's the point. There could be so many reasons that you and I cannot explain to anybody.
Exactly.
Like, this is exactly why. But so, what can we tell to the person who's being left, who was ghosted, who's feeling like, what did I do? Who's revisiting moment by moment everything they've ever done and said, who's going literally obsessive
Yeah.
or trying to find that why would they have ghosted me? And I have clients who go back, but they did say they liked me. So if they liked me, why are they leaving? What do you have to say to this person?
Well, this is something that someone said to me that was quite cruel, but I now think it's funny. I've mastered that problem. I had a boyfriend many years ago, and I've been around the block a few times. So, who said to me after we had dated for a year and a half or 2 years, something like that, he sat across from me and said, you know what, Elena? I know now that I want to be married, just not to you. So if you've ever been insulted, just think about that, right? That was really bad. But you know what? I learned from it. I met the woman he eventually married. I met her with him at an event that we both could have predicted we'd be at, but didn't matter. I was over it by then, over him. And I met her. And you know what? She was lovely. She was so sweet and so nice. And so, how do I say this? Where are you broadcasting from, Olga? I don't want to. Do you say where you're broadcasting?
I don't know what. Yep.
What part of the country?
Canada. I'm in Canada.
Oh, Canada. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is Midwest
Mhm.
United States. She was a very nice Midwestern girl, relatively unsophisticated, but seemed just very sweet. And I thought, I can understand that. He didn't want someone from the big city who had a lot of opinions about things, who had a very successful practice. He was a therapist also. So there were a lot of issues that caused him to say that and feel that way and not want to marry me. It would have been a mistake. I definitely know that now. So very often it's just because they don't want you doesn't mean there's anything terribly wrong with you. You're just not their type. Think about it that way.
Yeah. I have been in issues where I've told the guy I was dating for a year and a half, I do want to get married, just not to you. I don't see it.
Well, this guy was 43 at the time. So he needed to get going, right?
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I obviously pride myself on being really brutally honest. I would have had that conversation. I had that conversation and said it the person who would have probably wanted to get married to me. And then I had obviously the time and understanding, like whole space for that person to hear that information, not be easy. But I felt like I was doing a good deed by saying exactly how I felt. And like and now if he was to look in, saw who I was married to, he could understand why this is a much better, how it wouldn't have worked out. But what about not having that answer? How about not having, like, as painful as it is to have the brutal, like, I don't like how you smell. Like, I can imagine that would be a hard thing to hear and be like, oh my God, I stink. How do I fix this?
Right. Well, if he had had the courage to tell her
Right.
early on, maybe she did have a problem,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes the person giving you tough love is doing you a favor in the end, but they have to know how to be tactful about it. You know, there are no courses in school for how you break up, and yet those are the most painful experiences in life you can have.
So for those who don't get the answer, who have been ghosted,
There
what does
is,
that person do? How does she move past it or he moves past it?
well, first of all, look in the mirror and ask yourself if you've been ghosted before, right? Are you giving off a signal that you can't accept any criticism at all?
Okay.
Because maybe this has been a slow lead up to, I can't stay with this person, but I'm afraid to tell her or him, right? I'm afraid of what would happen. I actually ghosted some. Just made me think of it, Olga. I did. I had a date with a man many years ago who I found very attractive. And on the first date, I did something very stupid. I went up to his apartment, which he told he lived with a roommate, and there was no problem. You know, it was just late and he wanted to keep talking, etc., etc. Longer story short, when I got up to his apartment when we did, there was no roommate there. And this guy was going to be unpleasant. Luckily, he fell asleep.
And you ghosted him.
I ghosted him and I went out on the street in Manhattan at 2 o'clock in the morning. There was no one on the street at all. It was almost impossible to get a taxi, but I did finally. And I'm here to tell the story. But I was scared of him,
Yeah.
really scared.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, I think it's a good idea to try to ghost somebody.
Ghost them. Yeah.
And don't be stupid and go up to somebody's apartment on a first date. That's the other piece of advice.
Ladies, are you listening to that? First date, never at his place.
Never, never. A neutral place, especially for a breakup, right? Not your place, not his place, a place where there are other people around. The other thing you can do is ask a friend if they have been with you when you were with this guy. Why do they think, that he might have done that or she might have done that to you? Was there something that they could have been afraid of in relation to you? Or what? Maybe he's just very shy and doesn't know how to handle these situations.
And I think that's a great point, actually. As a mindset coach, like I coach women into leadership and in leadership, I'm often coaching them to stop feeling afraid of conflict. And it's not the fear that I'm going to be unsafe, they're going to attack me. It's the fear of like, I hate conflict. I don't want to raise conflict. I don't want to say anything that's going to show up as a disagreement. So I'd rather not say. And I think that it occurs to me that might be one, like if people are allergic to what they consider conflict, they might much rather have the courage to leave without explaining than raising, listen, I'm unhappy, and then potentially having to have some level of conflict and seeing that other person in pain and being too uncomfortable with it all.
Right. And at the end of the day, what's the worst thing that can happen to you? If you tell someone why, maybe they'll be angry at you. Maybe they'll point out a weakness of yours or a problem that you have for them. Maybe you can learn something from it, even if it's delivered in a not very pleasant way. Take it in. It's not the end of the world to realize you're not the only woman on the planet or the only man on the planet that someone can fall in love with. I know it's tough, but that's tough love. Those of you in the audience, you're not seeing me, but I'm as old as you can get and still be a therapist, but very active. So I can say things that a younger therapist might not say, right? Like, you're not the only person on the planet. Somebody might fall in love with someone else and prefer them to you, but you're not the only one going through that. It's excruciating, but you're not alone. It happens, I guess, millions of times a day. Otherwise, what would we therapists do for a living?
Yeah, we'll be out of a job.
It was only one person who ever got dumped. Never mind Oh, Lord.
Not
Okay.
when you being done for work, it's what Elena is saying. But let me ask you this. So let's say that I got ghosted by a relative. Something like you said that you don't expect that their relation, like I have a 2-year-old son. I expect to be in his life for as long as I'm alive. That's sort of like my expectation. I would absolutely love, and I think in my head that I'm fostering all the right conditions to a lasting relationship with my son. And maybe he grows up and has a different opinion, and I am not part of his pack. I'm not part of who he wants to have in his circle of friends and family. And so, whether he ghosts me or not, he's like not involving me in his life. I'm going to go through grief and emotions. I'm going to do what you just told me, which is why will he have left? What will be the reason? Like, what can I look inwards and say, I can see why he might be wanting complete freedom from my relationship. Maybe I was an overly, I don't know, controlling mother. Maybe I was overly worrisome. Maybe I wasn't accepting of something about him. Maybe, whatever the case might be, and get that answer. What if I've done that risk? Like, and I'm just hypothetically speaking, if I do this exercise and I don't find generally nothing,
You
like that
of advice as to how to handle that?
yeah, like what if the person who gets ghosted or
Like,
gets left behind does their inner insight search and cannot come up with a reason as to help them understand why their relative may have left? What do you suggest for that person at that point to heal this, to get past it, to understand it and organize it in their mind?
right. Well, my first suggestion was something that someone did with me at the suggestion of her therapist. I didn't call someone after a play date when my younger son, who's now 50 something, was 3, right? The mother of the other child called me and said, my therapist said, I have to ask you why you didn't call me for another play date after the first one. And I said, well, I thought about it and I said, you know what? I had a perfectly good time. And so did my son. But I think there were 2 reasons. One, I'm very blessed. I have more friends than I can keep up with now. But it's also that I thought that you acted a little bit like you didn't need a friend, right? So I don't mean that as a criticism. It's just you seemed very self-sufficient. I kind of admired you for it, right? But it didn't occur to me that it would matter to you one way or the other. So I happened to hit the right note that time. I'm not always able to, summon these things up right away. But she was very grateful for it. And she said, it's not true. I don't have any friends. She had moved out there recently. I forget all the circumstances. It was many years ago now. But someone can tell you the way you're behaving, even if it's not direct, like I had experienced it with her. But ask a friend, they know you very well. Maybe maybe you come on too opinionated. Maybe you raise your voice too much. Maybe a thing that you can change, right? There are some things you can't change. So it's not the kindest thing, like you're too short or too tall, right? People break up with people because of that. I've seen it, right?
Same.
You see it.
I've seen it too.
Right. So, but something you can change, right? And it may have nothing to do with you. You could start off with that assumption. You look like their father mistreated you when you were little. It can be that, and you choose them originally because of that, but then it comes back to haunt you, and you realize you just can't be with that person. There's so many possibilities. And I'm going to say this, sometimes, not all the time, you have to live with the mystery. There are just mysteries in life. Why did this happen? Why did that happen? If it's a pattern where you've been ghosted, or you're cutting people off right and left, and it's bothering you, then I say look for a good therapist or a life coach and be willing to just say, okay, obviously I'm contributing to the ghosting happening to me. Either I'm doing it or they're doing it to me or both.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that as a mindset life coach myself, I'd love the idea of first and foremost, look for if it's a pattern. ask yourself what part of it was mine, what belongs to me. In my experience with working with women, many of them assume like it was all of their fault and desperately try to search for all the reasons why. It could have been maybe I'm not attractive enough, maybe I spoke too much, maybe I didn't say enough, maybe I should have let them do this, maybe I should have, like so many of that. I also think that's an extreme, like not taking any responsibility is not great because there might be something that you can learn from that, but also not owning all, like blaming yourself. There's two people and it takes two, and it could be a matter of you're just not the one for them. And it's not nothing wrong with you. It's their preferences, right? And so I always tell my clients, you're not wine and you're not money. So you cannot be liked by everybody. There will be people in the world that will not like you, just like you like everybody. And so there is that percentage, why they leave us. And if we don't have an answer, and if you have done the self work and you cannot come up with a legit reason that you're like, okay, yes, I did something clearly that may have caused it. I agree with Elena. And I think looking for your own emotional support might be helpful so that you can cope with the grief of that absence and that abandonment and accept that mystery. I think that's a hard one. It's a hard one to live with because we're curious.
I just thought you made me think of another thing. Moving on, if that relationship was critical to you and you've lost it, you may need help after a while to find a replacement, right? I've seen it happen a million times. And actually, both books I've done on estrangement start with a story that is just incredible about a woman who doesn't move. She wants to move south from New York because she's getting old. The weather is cold and she hates it in the winter. And she tells a perfect stranger that she wants to move south, but she can't. And the stranger says to her, why not? And she says, well, I'm hoping my daughter will come back. This is what in your story, following up on your story. And the stranger says to her, well, how long has it been? And the woman says, 30 years. She's still waiting for her daughter to come back. I get the chills every time I read that passage in the book. Every time I tell that story, it breaks my heart. Find someone else to love. If you have to wait, but don't stop your life, right? You could never deserve that. Nobody deserves that.
And it speaks of the love of a mother too.
Yes.
That's the part that I cry. Like
Yes.
whew,
Right.
birth of mothers. She'd rather stay there till the day she dies in case her daughter comes back and knows where to find her.
Right. And that was before Google.
Of course, on Facebook. We didn't have Facebook, so we didn't know where to find people. That's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about other types of cutoffs that happen. And I love these episodes to give my listeners tools that they listen to us talk. They're like, that was great. I'm going to apply this. Okay, this is a good thing. So dealing with rejection in general is hard. It's why I'm pretty sure you wrote this whole book, to help people
Definitely.
cope with that emotion that nobody likes to feel, which is crap. I've been rejected.
Right. Well, do you want me to go over? I don't know how much time we have, but if you want me to go over the different types of cutoff, it is quite fascinating what comes in between ghosting at one end and, a perfect reconciliation at the other, or relationships that never get cut off. I'm happy to do that to give people a sense of, oh, that's the kind of cutoff I have. Right? It's not ghosting, but it's this.
Yeah. At least name them and maybe we just dive into a few.
Sure. There's emotional disconnection. First of all, a complete cutoff is at the other extreme. No talking, no texting, no meeting for dinner, no emailing, no message through someone else telling to go to hell. No, nothing, no silence. And ghosting is at the other extreme where you don't even know why this has happened. But in between, let's start with something less than a complete cutoff, but you're still in touch, but you're emotionally separated and disconnected. You avoid talking about anything personal with the person. You just keep it all superficial. Okay, so there's that. There's what I call an incipient cutoff where there are no rules. You haven't decided you're not going to be friends or anything, but you feel this tension when you're with the person as if something is about to blow up. So there are a lot of people who have that. There's a partial cutoff. Oh, that happens a lot in separation and divorce, just as an example, where couples, divorced couples will show up at a graduation or the wedding or for holidays every year, but they're not otherwise in touch. Indirect cutoff. Yeah, this is a good one. Tell your father that I'm not taking the kids this weekend. You don't communicate directly, but you do by a third party. Sometimes it's through a lawyer. Sometimes it's through a sister-in-law. You know what I mean. Okay. Then there's a temporary cutoff. I'm going to stop speaking to you until you stop using heroin, as an example, or as you stop drinking yourself into a stupor when we go to a party. There's a conditional cutoff. Oh, I'm sorry. That's a conditional cutoff.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. A temporary cutoff is, look, I've just had it with you. I can't take all the fighting. I can't. Let's pause it. This is a couple say, let's not see each other for a few weeks and then get together again and see what we want to do. Okay. This one happens every day. A preemptive cutoff. I'm going to cut him off before he cuts me off. So you break up when he had no intention of leaving you. He's just very frustrated. I have a couple like that now.
So how do you deal with like some of these sound to me, and maybe this is because I do have some background in the field, but for example, that one I smile because God knows I played that one so many times in my younger years. I'm like, I'll beat you to it if I can think of it. Where does this response come from? Why do we sort of like, why have to leave them before they leave us if they're going?
You know, I know you know the answer to it, but I'm going to tell it anyway because you want to protect yourself. You don't want to get hurt, right? So you'll be the one to do it first. So then it seems like you're in control. You need the control, right? You agree?
I'm going to be a spoiler alert here. Having done it several times, you get hurt anyways, okay? Because that's not like this person. You wouldn't really want it to have ended, but wanting to not get hurt, you get hurt. So it doesn't really work as protecting you, but that's definitely the intention behind.
Psychologically, right?
Psychologically, yeah.
To protect yourself. And it's all understandable, right? All of this is just human. Okay. Forced or instigated cutoffs. Think of a cult. Okay. The rule in this cult is you do not speak to your parents or anyone else in your family. This is your family now. Okay. It can also be a governmental thing like orders of protection, allowed to go near the house because something bad will happen and somebody's turned you in. And then the complete cutoff, which is the other extreme. So, and then I don't think we'll have much time, but there are intergenerational cutoffs too that ripple down through the generations. My grandfather cut off my mother and I didn't even know he existed. So I had a therapist say that to me. He said there were no cutoffs in my family. And I said, are you sure? He went home where this was in a class setting. I said, check that one out. And he went home and he thought about it and he said, I don't believe this, but I was wrong. My aunt cut off my mother for 20, 30 years. She doesn't live on the island I live on, but he said that, and my mother never talked to her. But I know she was upset and my mother used to get very depressed. And I think that's why. And it sent him into a whole exploration of his family history. And he was a wonderful guy, very sensitive, but he had blocked it off, I think, because his mother had tried to.
Mm-hmm. But that's interesting. Like these cutoffs happen everywhere.
Everywhere. And I don't think I said this, but The book starts with scratch the surface. I know this by heart. Scratch the surface of almost any family, and you'll find a significant cutoff. It's it's like a hidden epidemic, really, because it's embarrassing. It makes people feel like they don't have their quote house in order, but it's a human thing. And if we could be a little more open about it, I think it would help, and it would help people reconcile where that's possible.
Because we fear that rejection so much. And when it has happened in our families, it's not well spoken. Obviously, that was a moment of tension. That's a break that has caused hurt. So that's all we continue to understand of these separations is we just remember the hurt and how not pleasant those are. And when we think about family and love, we all want to think about unity and, togetherness. And so I can see why we as a whole collectively have such a hard time even looking inwards. But as soon as you said that, I'm like lifting to my family. I'm like, oh yeah, this is all the truth.
Yeah.
I like you don't think about it on a regular basis, but true. That plays true for my family. Okay. A listener is listening to us and they're like, yep. And maybe they see a pattern. Maybe they are the ones living. I really had to do my own work to look into the type of separation that preamp, I think it's the one you said. Q2, I'll leave first. Trust me. I'm out of here before you have a chance to.
Yeah.
And being aware of the pattern just really helped me heal whatever part of my heart needed to be healed, right? Like to be okay being loved and being okay being vulnerable because we are so afraid of getting hurt. Now, you talk a lot about looking into the mirror. So if we were to leave our listeners with like one piece of advice when it comes to relationships and cutoffs, whether they're the ones leaving or they're being left, how do we do this looking into the mirror? How do we look into having the readiness and the motivation even to when we're hurt, especially or when we're afraid of hurt, to still open space to investigate with curiosity what's happening within us, what might have happened in the relationship, so that we're not jaded for life, so that we don't carry this sense of anger and hatred and victim that I so desperately want no woman to ever feel or men that they
Right.
were victims, so that they can just kind of like do something about this breakup and think, okay, whether that's your daughter who's left the home and the relationship, or your beloved partner, or the guy you just went out on a date and you were very excited about and he never showed up.
Well, sometimes I'm not sure if we're talking about trying to understand what happened or trying to repair the relationship after there's been a cutoff or a rift, because there's stages, right? First, I think everybody has to calm down. Right. Usually doesn't work to try to fix it right away. And sometimes it starts with, okay, my feelings are really, really hurt. And just accepting that it won't kill you to be hurt. It happens to everybody. And do what you can to feel better by just spending time with friends. That is so healing, right? If you're a spa person, check in for a week or two. Whatever will soothe you is what I want to say. Whether you did the breakup, you may still be hurt. You may
Absolutely.
yeah.
I've done that too.
Take care of yourself first, whatever that means to you. Spend time with people who do love you and it won't give you tough love on day one, right? Right at the beginning, you just need to feel a little better and be with people who understand that. I would read my book personally because there's a lot of good advice in there. There's a whole chapter on looking in the mirror and what it's involved. What feelings, say, drove you to cut the person off, right? It could be something as simple as being jealous of them. It happens every day. It could be that someone's jealous of you. There's a whole chapter on that. There's a whole chapter on if people who feel betrayed. I told you a secret that you swore you would never tell people, and you told them, and I can't live with that. So betrayal, or as happened to my husband, somebody stole one of his pieces of art, his best friend, and he has not spoken to him since.
I don't blame him.
Right. That's a betrayal. And I did a lot of research for this book. I read Dante's Inferno, and betrayal is in the ninth circle of hell. And I think it's a betrayal by somebody you were very close to. I can't remember the exact detail, but you can read Dante's Inferno too. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And you talk about matters of principle. And I think
Yes.
betrayal is one of those matters of principle. That's a big one for me. I think that's when I can be so cutting. Like if my principles and are so vastly different from that person's, I have zero hesitation. I'm like packing my bags and leaving. Or like, yeah, I've ended friendships. Like,
Right. It happened in the Nixon era where politically, oh my God, it happens with, and now with you know who and you know who and you know who. I have stuff in the Estranged book about that, so you can learn what my feelings are, but I'm not going to push anything on anybody now. So matters of principle are critical in relationships. Also, mental health issues. There are stories, there's a chapter on cutting off from people who are seriously ill and pose either a physical or psychological danger to you. There's the saddest little snippet from a book called The Memory Palace, about why a woman and her sister changed their names so their mother couldn't find them. That's a really powerful book. So I recommend it. I recommend that chapter. And I'm missing one thing. I had to admit, I will tell you, I thought when I started this project that I was only defining a cutoff as a complete cutoff, no contact, no nothing. And I had to realize there were shades of gray. I had to open up my thinking. And it was fascinating coming up with all these, different ways of cutting off. And by the way, in the first book, Not on Speaking Terms, I do have a co-author, did have a co-author, and we're still speaking. And her name is Suzanne. We're very close.
I think this conversation is incredibly important because we have all had a broken heart because of a breakup. We can all relate to the pain that comes from the absence of a human, either because we chose and it wasn't our best interest. I personally, I ended my first marriage. It was short lived. Um, Still loving my husband very much, but it was what was in our best interest to do. And I think that this is such an important source of conversation to have and to explore because I still do pro bono work with our children's hospital, local children's hospital with palliative care with the parents. And I think of breakups similarly to what I think of the grief of a child. Nobody wants to talk about it. It's so awful. It's so painful. People think if we can just avoid it entirely and pretend it never happened, we're just better off. And I want to encourage every single one of you to not avoid the hard feelings. Elena said the best is not going to kill you, is not going to kill you to have a broken heart and feel the feeling. I'm pretty open minded and I not always send people off to therapy necessarily, but this is one of those places where I think support yourself as much as you can. So you heal that heart, you learn from your patterns. That's what was so helpful for me after my divorce was to actually sign myself up for psychoanalysis for a full year weekly. And I learned so much about myself, so much about myself that by the time I decided to get married again, I made a much more logical choice because I've realized I was in a pattern of finding partners who are patients, essentially, that I could cancel, that had a lot of emotional, that was my need to be needed. So not only did it help me heal my heart, but it also helped me understand myself and make better choices. So sometimes these breakups come with a beautiful gift of self-understanding,
Awareness.
self-awareness and understanding. And I do think this is one of those pivotal times where we need to be well supported emotionally. I think a takeaway is sometimes we just need to learn to live with the mystery of why things didn't work out. I do think, I don't know, Elena, it might be your experience as well. When my clients are desperately looking for a why and they finally get it, their brain looks for another why. Why that? So I just feel like the why is such a useless question at times. Like asking yourself now what is probably a much better use of your time and brain power.
I think, though, that we've talked a lot about things that can help people not blame themselves,
Mhm.
because if they need to know why, it's probably so they don't feel 100% responsible.
Guilty.
Right. But I just thought of that at listening to you. And so I think anyone who's been through this and feels like maybe it's all my fault. No, it can't be. It can't be, because something happened to the relationship. There's no way it can be all your fault. You can take a little responsibility. If you insist, you can take more, but it's not going to kill you to do that.
I agree. You even said it before we were recording, like, doesn't add up logically. That is 100% your fault. That is off, okay? Can never be 100%. And it's also not necessarily 50-50, okay?
Exactly.
Elena, where can people find you? How do they get a hold of you? Let's say that they are in a relationship right now, they want to work it through, or maybe they're just being left, maybe they're struggling emotionally. Like, who is your ideal person? Who do you help like the most?
Well, I'm a generalist. I love working with individuals, men and women, and I love working with individuals, couples, and families. And within families, I have a little specialty, which is adult children and their parents who need to do some repair work. So I love that. But I work half with couples, half with individuals, I would say, and an occasional family. So there's that. And they can reach me at ELB, Elena Lesser Bruun, those are the initials, elbtherapy.com. And I want to just add, can I add a tiny little proviso there? I've decided that I probably shouldn't call myself a therapist, although I am. I like thinking of myself as a consultant, because most of you listening are quite grown up and can take care of yourselves, but a little consultation doesn't hurt, right? And if you don't like what I say, you can ignore it or you can fire me. That's it. It's often fun to explore. It doesn't all have to be dark and scary.
Yes. I love that term. And you know what? I'll be far more willing to see a consultant than a therapist.
Yes. Yes.
It feels a little bit more like, okay, you don't have all the answers, but I'm consulting with you. And then I'm going to see what I want to do about it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there's something bad happening.
Exactly. Doesn't mean you have to be sick.
No, you don't. Please don't wait to be sick to ask for help.
Right. Olga, you and I agree about a lot of things.
This is why you're in my podcast. I get a lot of requests for people to come into the podcast, and I sort through diligently. I really look for what gives me an energy of the person. And when I feel a connection, I'm like, yes, they're coming. They're coming to the podcast. So that is fun. You guys listening, this is the very first time that her and I meet. We've never had any, we've had a few email exchange.
Yeah.
Very, very to the point. Can you do this? Yes. Okay. We'll meet here. Okay. First time we're meeting, but you can feel this chemistry. Yes, we're getting along well. We could work together. I could totally refer people to you because the people who like me like you. So for anybody listening, head over to the show notes. All of Elena's information is going to be there, including her books and the links to her books.
Yes.
If you want to read her book, I highly suggest it. Just from, I don't own your book. I will order it. I want to have it.
Amazon.com. I forgot.
Yes.
All my books are on there. I guess I shouldn't mention the other book. We mentioned a couple of them.
Yeah. You can get them all.
I have a fun children's book that I worked on during the pandemic called Maxine Gets Her Vaccine.
It rhymes. I like it. Then you have strange, not speaking terms, and marrying well.
Yes.
Great value, as you were able to hear in this episode today. We could talk for months and hours to you guys, but we won't do that. Instead, I urge you to go over her website and look her up. And if this speaks to you, and you know what? I have to say, there's something about having a therapist that's wise, that's seen it all, that's lived it all. I think it's so peaceful to know, like the way you were laughing about, like, trust me, there's other people who have gone through it. It's such a good feeling. Like I trust you 100%. I'll trust you that that it comes with that experience. I love it. And I think that as a former therapist, I think that everyone should visit a therapist every once in a while. Couples too. It's incredibly helpful and fun. Don't wait until it's irreparable. Like go soon. Like as you will go to see the doctor. It's fun. And I think the same about a life coach. We do different things and both are helpful to you. Like you get to learn about yourself. So if you've got any taboos about what it's like to be in therapy, Elena sounds like a fun person to go see. Fun consultant. She'll make you laugh. She'll give you quality thoughts to think about. And I think you do offer online sessions.
Absolutely.
So you don't have to be in New York. You can be anywhere. And
well, there's certain, I have to check on the rules. During the pandemic, yes. But otherwise, it's possible that the therapist has to be licensed in the state where you live.
okay.
So I'm not sure whether that's still true. I think during the pandemic, it's okay to go
Okay.
across state lines.
Otherwise, they can just call their consultant.
Yeah, that's true. I'll try. Sometimes people say, I'm afraid that you'll you'll know what I'm thinking. And I say to them, well, as little as I can. They're so nervous. I'm going to do brain surgery and stuff.
We end up knowing more about people because they tell us, because they're afraid that we're going to tell without them telling us that they tell us.
Yes.
It's fascinating. Like we could read minds. We don't read minds, okay, people? No therapists read minds. We don't have a magic wand. It's like, anything we know or capture is from things you've said. That's it.
Olga, I have to show you one thing.
Okay.
This is my magic wand. If I don't know what we should do, I use the magic wand. And I also have an 8-ball. We can search for the answer on my 8-ball.
You can hear, this is your person, guys. I want to have fun with you, and I'm come to use the magic wand. She basically has a magic wand, which is purple, which happens to be my favorite color. Love it.
Me too. Ooh. And it has sparkles in it. Sometimes I give them away. You can order them, Olga. I'll tell you.
These do. I will, and I'll give them away. I think that's such a great idea.
Yes.
Use your magic wand. I believe everybody can have what they want if they just know how to use that magic wand properly. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for sharing it with me. What a fun guest to have in the podcast. Thank you for doing the work you're doing.
It's an honor to be with you, Olga, and with all the people out there. Thanks for listening.
Mm-hmm.
Hope some of this was helpful.
It definitely was. So yeah, to know more about all of what we spoke, I say you head over to our show notes and take a look at Elena's book. And I'll see you guys next Monday. Hey guys, Olga here, interrupting your listening to invite you to participate in a confidence bootcamp of 5 days. You and I, 5 consecutive days, 5 hours, 5 incredibly transformational tools to help you let go of your critical self that keeps you small and doubting yourself and thinking you are incapable, and will help you transform to a better, most confident version of yourself. It's called Detox the Mind from Self-Critical to Self-Confident 5 days workshop. It is $97, and I promise you this will be the best $97 you have ever invested on yourself. Come learn the tools that help you change the mindset and will give you lasting effects way past the 5 days. As a woman who struggled with confidence, I know how to help you gain it back. Hope to see you in there.